Well, good morning, everyone. Being 9 o'clock, we're going to call the Marathon County Infrastructure Committee to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, moving on to number 3. I don't have any requests for any public comment. David didn't. Okay, thank you. Moving on to number 4, approval of the May 4th, 2023 Infrastructure Committee meeting minutes. They're in your packet. Everybody had a chance to look at them. Is there any corrections, questions? If not, I'll look for a motion to approve. Supervisor Robinson. Straub with a second. Any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. If there's no objections, I'd like to, when we move on to number 5, if we could first switch that with number 7A, the updates for the educational presentation and committee discussion. 7A, update from the CWA and discussion on the 2024 projects. We have Brian from the airport here to lead us with that. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a presentation. Got a presentation. Is it loaded or should I just plug it in? I have thumb drive. Yeah, there you go. All right, and you got it? Okay. Thank you for having me. This is largely the same presentation I gave to the Wausau Early Birds Rotary Club this morning at 7. So I'm going to keep it focused on the agenda topic, which is 2024 projects. There's a lot of tie over to the presentation, the other presentation I gave this morning. There's some air service stuff. We'll skip over that. But unless you have questions, I'm happy to go through it in any detail. Next slide, please. So I always like to start with the budget. You can see there it is $5.8 million for 2023. Realistically, operational budget is about $3.8 million. The additional money is transferred from fund balance for the runway shift project that we're doing. That will be made up through a grant later. We just fronted the money. So realistically, the budget's closer to $3.8 million. And I do like to remind committees, boards, whoever I present to, all revenues used at the airport are generated at the airport. So no county fund dollars go into to the operation of the airport. That said, we get grants, grants from the FAA, grants from the state. But typically the lion's share, the FAA grants are grants from the Aviation and Airways Trust Fund, which is a user-based system. It's not your April 15th tax dollars. Next slide, please. That's the airport. Just a quick overview. We have Marathon County shared with Portage County. Runs the airport, has just over 1,800 acres. 2 runways. Our east-west is runway 826, which is just under 7,700 feet long. Our north-south runway, runway 1735 that is 6,500 feet long. Just reconstructed 2 years ago. Full service airport, full ILS, FBO control tower, so we can meet any needs of the flying public. Now, moving into the projects, the master plan that's going on right now. That's really what's going to drive our projects in 2024 and beyond. So I thought it pertinent to give an update on that, where we're at. Some of this is new, the board hasn't seen, so Chris, close your eyes when we're going through this. But we'll kind of go through what the major study areas are. We completed a full master plan less than 10 years ago, probably 5-6 years ago, that focused on the runway geometry. That's the project we're doing right now. We didn't spend a lot of time on the terminal area, so the FAA asked that we conduct a terminal area master plan to address those areas that weren't addressed in the master plan. So that's really what this is, focus on the terminal area, but it's not the terminal itself. The terminal was, as you know, just reconstructed. That was finished 7 years ago, still in very good shape. It's going to be in very good shape for years to come. This is really everything else in terms of vertical development. Main focus areas are the FBO terminal, arrivals and departures building. I use the word terminal, but it's arrivals and departures for general aviation activity. The current one we have, it's an airport-owned facility that's leased out to our FBO, does not meet the needs of the passengers that we're serving. So we're going to look at relocating that. Our shop, too, is at the end of its useful life, doesn't fit all of the equipment, doesn't meet all of our needs. We're a little segmented in that some of our equipment's in our shop area, some's down on the east end of the airport. We've got a good opportunity to consolidate that, at least study that. And the third goal of this is identify areas to accommodate larger general aviation aircraft. Specifically, Gulfstreams, Global Expresses, we see quite a few of those coming through yearly, particularly in the winter. They'll come in because of our snow removal. We do have the best snow removal in northern Wisconsin, without question. Large aircraft operators recognize that. They come in, but they want to be in hangar, and we don't have the ability to accommodate them right now, so we're looking at ways to do that through that. Next slide, please. So this just graphically is our focus areas, near term, midterm, and long term. The majority of the discussion so far has been on the near term. That's what we'll focus on today. Midterm is the blue. That's once we've built out in areas for expansion just to the east of our fuel farm. And then long term is 20 years, give or take, down the road. We're not going to be developing any firm plans on how to develop that, more so space reservation, corridors to run utilities, access roads, et cetera, if and when we do need to develop that. So real briefly, again, this is that near-term area, which is something that we would look at developing, addressing in the next 3 to 6 years. You can see in the middle the FBO hangar, which is right up there. Our shop is just to the left of it, and the rest are predominantly hangars. Focus on that FBO area. That's really going to drive through the different options that I'll be presenting, what we do and where we put really everything else. And these are those three locations, or 4 locations rather. So the item listed as option 1, that's essentially build in its current position. Something we'll want to present to the board because that is our most cost-effective option, but it doesn't solve a lot of our space constraints, access issues, etc. Option 2, you can see it's very close, but just in front of the terminal. What that would look like is tear down of our westernmost hangar and build it in that location and keep our easternmost hangar. So it gives a little bit more room, particularly more room for our SRE, snow removal equipment, airport rescue and firefighting shop to expand. to better accommodate our needs and gives a better ramp presence for that GA user. Still very close to our snow removal operations, but very feasible. The third site is a new location that would be in the location of an existing hangar. And then the fourth site is up to the north where our T hangars would be. I'll get into more details on those as we go into the slides. But before that, a focus area as well is de-icing. So currently, the airport, the airlines don't use a tremendous amount of de-icing fluid. It's an alcohol-based fluid. So we don't have to collect it. We don't have to really do anything besides report how much we use annually. Reason for that is a lot of time and distance. It breaks down with sun, and it's benign by the time it enters the waterway. We'd like to be proactive in identifying ways to collect it, if not now, an easy add when we do also designate, or when we do need to, also designate an area specifically for de-icing. That gives better circulation for our commercial aircraft while the other aircraft are de-icing. Right now there's a bit of a bottleneck. So that's the focus area there. So this jumps back to the overall development. I'm going to show you 4 concepts today. Probably 2 are more viable than the 4, so I'll spend most time on those 2, but certainly open to any questions or comments as we go through it. This concept 1 is basically build in the existing location. So you can see item number 4 there, that is that FBO building that would really drive the development. That's where it is now, would be rebuilt. Certainly nicer, but still would be a struggle to accommodate all the needs of the passengers. Same thing with the shop. Because of the location of that FBO, arrivals and departures building, and the terminal, still very space constrained, and we probably wouldn't be able to consolidate our operation into one facility with this. Also, very close proximity with corporate aircraft and the commercial aircraft. Concept number 2, Jim, is shown here. That's similar, but it just makes a little more room for everybody. So this is where we tear down that westernmost hangar. You can see 5. And put the arrivals and departures building right in front of it. Right now, all of our hangars are full. Actually, we've got more demand than we've got hangar space for, so we don't want to tear anything down that we can't accommodate. 1 is a matter of good practice, but 2, we need it for our business, but the FBO's business as well. This one presents us with a good opportunity to do you see the large hangar shown as number 8 there, rebuild that hangar in that location. Actually, all of these examples will show a hangar in that location. I take that back, it's 6. That hangar is large enough to accommodate that Gulfstream size aircraft, Global Expresses, that we can't now. So that would be a strategic move to remove 1 hangar, but put another hangar up that actually fits our users better. Everything else remains largely the same, but there is more room with the removal of that hangar for snow removal equipment. Concept 3 tears down the west hangar, maintains the east hangar because it works well. It's relatively modern. It's maintainable. You can see that hangar number 6 is there as well to meet those needs. But the FBO building, listed as number 4, goes further to the east, which helps circulation in that it separates more the commercial aircraft from the private jets. Also, you can see a little bit larger snow removal and airport rescue and firefighting facility. The key benefit to that is this would allow for drive-through bays for our snow removal equipment. Our primary tools for snow removal are combination units, so it's a truck tractor combination that's jointed, has a broom, a plow, blowers on. It's 60 feet long, I want to say. Currently, and in every previous concept, we have to back those in. So what we're doing today, it's doable, but with a 24-hour operation, 15 different people that are operating it, certainly not a best practice, where that drive-through, they can just drive straight through. It's a lot safer, less opportunity for damage. And then concept 4, that's primarily where we move the the FBO building up to where the T hangars are. We'd have to tear down the T hangars, relocate them to a greenfield site. You can see just a little further to the east. This sounds really good when you're talking about it because they've got their own campus, they're away from everybody. But practically, when you are getting those large aircraft that we do see, there's a big bottleneck. How they can access it. Some aircraft wouldn't even be able to access it. Also the most expensive by far because of how much stuff we just have to tear down. So probably not feasible, but certainly something that we want to carry forward to the board to do our due diligence. So this is the project we have going on right now. I know this is a 24, so I won't spend a lot of time on that, but it's been 7-8 years in the making. We received a grant for it last year to shift our runway. It's essentially shifting our runway 400 feet to the east, so our thresholds aren't overlapping ends of the runway. You can see that right now. Go ahead to the next slide. You can see what the ultimate configuration will look like. There you can see that separation of the two runway ends. Other benefits from this, this was certainly an FAA-driven initiative, but through it we were able to upgrade our lighting, our airfield lighting to all LED infrastructure. When you couple that with the project we did on the north-south runway, all of our airfield will be completely LED lit by the end of this year. New nav aids, new ILS system, new approach lighting system. So it'll be truly a new airfield. Although we are maintaining about 6,500 feet of Kevin's runway because the concrete is still in great shape. So 2024, getting on to the agenda, should be a little bit quieter, quite honestly, than everything I talked about. That's happening this summer. 24, we've really got 3 projects identified, or at least planned to be identified. First one you can see there is our air traffic control tower. That was taken the day it opened 30 years ago, a little over 30 years ago. That's an airport-owned, airport-maintained facility. There has never been any federal dollars in it. We received a grant from FAA through the bipartisan infrastructure law this summer for $608,000 to completely renovate not the facility but the equipment. So we'll be getting all new state-of-the-art equipment on the runway. Now at the end of probably next year or spring of next year, the air traffic control tower will have all current modern equipment too. So we'll be sitting very well for the future. The fence project, you can see that there. Our fence has some issues. Wildlife can dig under it. Just getting weak in a few spots. We have a grant application in for fiscal year 2022 funding that went in early this year. We're waiting to hear the results on that, but if we do get funding for it, we could get started on that probably as soon as next spring. And it's scalable. We could get the full amount where we replace essentially the whole fence line, other than what's been replaced in the last decade or so through the projects we've been doing. But the large majority from that could be the biggest, anywhere to just a small segment of it. It was specifically written vague where we can get whatever money's left just to give us the best opportunity for funding. And then the third item, you can see that large hangar there. That's that large Gulfstream Global Express sized hangar that we'd be looking at, probably not building next year, but starting the design process. Through the bipartisan infrastructure law, there is some funding available that has never been available before, where we can get funding for these revenue generating type facilities that we truly do need. And it's an exciting opportunity for us to actually get that done. So that will most likely be the first action item, of course, pending board approval from that master plan we previously talked about. Air service, should I skip over that because it's not an agenda item? Or should I just give you the highlights?
Go ahead.
Okay. We're down, certainly from air service, and it's not for lack of demand. It's not for lack of support. All of our flights are completely full going out. It's due to a nationwide pilot shortage. We are served exclusively by regional air carriers. Yes, there's Delta, there's American on the side of the plane, but that's just paint. We're actually flown by Envoy, Endeavor, Air Wisconsin, and they're great airlines. The challenge is they're much smaller. They don't have the economies of scale a true Delta or a true American would, and they can't afford to pay their pilots' crew as much. So the nationwide pilot shortage isn't spread evenly. The large air carriers are generally whole because that's the pipeline. The regional carriers they steal from, making the large air carriers whole, but the regional fleet is decimated. We see that we're down approximately 50% of our flights from certainly pre-COVID, but even after COVID. 2021, we had 10, 11 flights, depending on the time of the year. Right now, we're at 4. Yes, they're larger aircraft, so we do have proportionately more seats, but we're still down total number of seats. Not unique to Central Wisconsin Airport. Airports smaller than us are doing worse. Airports larger than us are doing a little bit better. Unfortunately, the airlines make the decision on what to give service to, largely based on the size of the airport, size of the community. Starting to turn around, so it's not all bad news. Starting July 5th, American will add their third flight back, so a 30% increase. That's great to see. We know that'll do well. Their load factors have been in the low 90s, which is almost impossibly high. During the U.S. Senior Open, American's going to be adding flights and upgauging. Delta will be adding flights with their larger CRJ-900 aircraft, so that's coming. And then, of course, I know everybody's been watching relatively closely the activity with our Small Community Air Service Development Grant. That's a grant that the counties and the airport got last year, and I've been working with every feasible low-cost carrier to start service from Seaway to Orlando, Fort Myers, and or Phoenix. Not necessarily all of them. Could be any combination thereof. Getting very close. I will say, expect an announcement this summer. So stay tuned for that with service starting this year. Can't give any more details than that. They've asked me not to, but there's plenty of demand. If you want to go to the next slide, that kind of speaks to it. So this is pre-pandemic, pre-COVID, pre-pilot shortage. We only captured 39% of the people that are traveling in our catchment area. Our catchment area isn't anything more sophisticated than if you live closest to Seaway, you should be flying out of Seaway. If you live closest to another airport, you're in their catchment area. So, with roughly twice the amount of traffic we have now, we still had leakage to other airports. So when presenting this information to our legacy carriers for additional flights, for additional destinations, and certainly to low-cost carriers, it just tells them that there's a tremendous amount of demand and any additional service would be supported by our community. And that is my presentation in a nutshell. Any questions for me?
Thank you. Any questions for Brian? I have one quick one. With these 4 concepts, when are you going to decide on one of those, or bring them to the board, or is this?
Yep. So they will be presented to the board in the July board meeting. All 4 of them will be. I don't think we're going to ask for a final recommendation because this will be the first time the board's seen it. That's asking a bit much to say.
Okay, that's.
I think we're going to try to eliminate the 2 that don't make sense, to get down, see what kind of additional information the board would like, bring that back probably in August for that final recommendation.
Okay.
Then implementation is purely driven on demand and funding. So this would be to include it in our master plan, to put it on our airport layout plan, and that's it. No decision at that point would be made to initiate construction on any of it. Purely just to reserve those spaces for that type of function if and when funding becomes available or when it makes sense.
Yep, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Right. Okay, well, thank you very much. Appreciate the updates. Thank you. All right, now we'll move back up to number 5, policy issue discussion and potential committee determination. 5A1, continued discussion regarding the 2024 annual budget and policy recommendations from the committee. A1 is starting with mandatory discretionary programs documents. I'm not sure where we left off last meeting. When I was reviewing the packet, I just wanted to get some comments on how the committee wanted to move forward. If the services that the Highway Department starts on page 34 in your packet, and there's 24 services that are outlined there. There's one that is not mandatory. The rest of them are mandatory. And I wasn't sure how the committee wanted to, if we wanted to start reviewing those. I don't know how, I don't think we got into the particular services too much last meeting. But if the committee wants to start, or if they have any questions, does a member have a question on a particular one? The one that I was going to start with, because I like to start easy, is the non-mandatory one on the bottom of the next page, which is the interdepartment construction assistance, parking lot grading, construction, and maintenance. That's the only non-mandated one. And then just to emphasize the additional information on the bottom of that, making and maintenance of county highways is mandated. However, service levels are generally non-mandated, except for levels of services with respect to the county staff activities with state roadway systems and dictate this by the state of Wisconsin. I don't know how the committee wants to move forward. John, would this be I don't know if we had to go for all 24 of them or start with particular ones that supervisors have questions on?
Well, this is an issue that most of the committees are struggling with. So the three questions that we posed at the last meeting were, what services should we provide? And those get into those that are mandated. What level of service should we provide? And that is, even within those mandated areas, there are different variations of what that service could look like. And while we're mandated to provide it, it's not necessarily defined by the state or others for many of those activities. So is there some discretion in those? And then finally, what we're looking for is how are our fees and our charges, are there opportunities to increase those? So it's really up to the committee as to, are there certain areas that they think that we could either scale back or expand. These are opportunities to look at it both from the perspective of what are we doing that we might not need to do, or what should we be doing more of, or additional work should we be doing. So the list is a great place to start, but isn't necessarily a limitation on where we can go at the end of the day. I don't know if that helps, or Lance, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have anything. Not working. I don't have anything to add, excuse me, relative to your process. If you do have questions, Mr. Chair, you referenced one program, the Interdepartmental Construction Assistance program on the bottom of page 35 of the packet, or the top of page 33, excuse me, the top of page 35 of the packet, or the top of page 33 of that document that's in your packet. I can have Jim kind of describe some of the work that he's done under that program, but simply put, it's the Highway Department working with other departments on things that the Highway Department can do. Like recently, and Jamie Polly shared this at the Environmental Resources Committee earlier this week, the Highway Department did a paving project on a park roadway rather than contract that out. Now that saves the county money because rather than having all of the funds go to a private entity. We're able to essentially pay ourselves to do the work, and then Jim gets to spend those dollars again through your budget process where you allocate those funds to go. So I don't know if Jim wants to share any additional projects that kind of fit that bill, but happy to answer any questions or try to answer any questions you have relative to projects listed, or programs listed, excuse me.
Thank you. Jim?
So besides that project, we do a lot of work for townships while we're, putting a lot of culverts in for townships, kind of the main thing. We have other smaller projects we do for them, but our main gig with the townships are putting in culverts for them. So what we're doing at that point is we're pulling people off our budget. Basically, the town or municipalities are paying our folks their wages at that point. It's 100%, whatever our cost is sent out to the municipalities, and also provides revenue on our equipment. Because our equipment all has a set rate. Anytime we use any piece of equipment, we have a set rate on that. So, even if we're doing work on a town, it doesn't matter if we're doing work on a state road, for the Parks Department, town, or us, there's the same rate charged for each piece of equipment. So we have equipment rates set up that are set by the state of Wisconsin. In turn, we take that money and put it into our 268, our shop account, and that money is used to buy the tires, the grease, the lubes, even the snowplow blades. All that revenue that's generated from that equipment fund goes into that fund. So it generates revenue for us while it takes people off the highway payroll. Sometimes we're paying ourselves, as Lance mentioned, with the Parks Department, but a lot of times when we're doing work for the municipalities, we have a project coming up with remote here shortly. We're going to be doing work for different townships. It takes people off our budget, saving us money.
Thank you. As far as the revenue that you generate off the equipment, is that like is there a depreciation on the equiment? Or?
Yeah, we have it's called a Schedule 7. It has every piece of equipment that we have. I ran a report the other day. Every piece of equipment that we have, and it shows every expense, including depreciation on that piece of equipment. So at the end of the year, we know vehicle 104, we either made $2,000, we lost $500 with depreciation. So we know every piece of equipment where that revenue stands at the end of the year.
Thank you.
Last year, for example, just to finish up, last year, time we put our expenditures with our revenue, we were $285,000 to the good that we had generated that, paid for all of our things. If we don't do that route, there'd be a tax levy. We're just going to be saying we need money for tires, lube, grease, everything I explained before. So we're generating that revenue ourselves.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Getting back to that program like that, and I know one of the other questions on here is understanding the department's use of levy. And I maybe shouldn't be asking this, is that levy neutral then? It doesn't cost because they pay all the fees as far as the employees and the equipment and
For
that particular project.
For those, correct. There's no cost to the department at all. It's 100% reimbursable.
Okay. Thank you. Supervisor Robinson?
I think long-term part of this discussion should be what is the county's policy relative to county trunk highways? We have the most lanes of county trunk highways in the state. Other counties, I think Washington County has 193 miles of roadway. They've done a lot of jurisdictional transfers back to other units of government. The problem there is that the governments have to accept it, but they also, all of their roads are all-season roads, and we get that question asked of us, what is our policy relative to reconstruction and all-season roads? I think there are some things that we would want to, as a policy that would have implications on this or future budgets, begin to have a discussion on, because we're required to snowplow. I think that's once every 30 days. I don't think that many of us would be elected if we did that. So I think what we would want to do is just have some of those policy discussions on an ongoing basis of which roads should be all season. We've also had the discussion in the past relative to accommodating bike lanes and other things. So there are opportunities for us within the context of budgetary constraints or budgetary commitments to have discussions relative to what level of service do we want to, what is the level of the road, the pacer rating of 7, et cetera.
Thank you. I guess when you say all-season roads, what,
No weight limits. So they're built to a higher standard so that when the weight limits go on, they can operate all the farm equipment and other vehicles necessary to support them. But when you've got 193 miles of road, it's a lot easier than when you've got the number of miles of road that we have.
thank you. Go ahead, Jim.
And maybe Kurt knows it because he's with the state budget more than I, but there is a huge push right now in Madison. It's called the Ag Bill. It's supposedly one-time money to put forward to counties and municipalities to upgrade these roads for a all-season road. So there may be some money out there. They're asking for one-time money now, but a lot of times the one-time money turns into more than one-time money. So it may be an opportunity for us to not upgrade all of our roads that are posted, but some of those main ones that we want to take a look at.
Thank you. Go ahead, Chairman Gibbs.
Jim, what's the relative cost increase for changing a road from current to an all-season road? Is it 25% greater? Is it 50% greater?
It's probably a little over $1 million now to do 1 mile, time you want to grade up a road and do it. Right now, our cost for paving a road, I just ran some numbers yesterday. One back in my old files. 25 years ago, I spoke about this many times, or how much it costs us to do a road. So I ran an average 25 years ago, which was $69,398 to pave a mile. Currently, we're between $200 and $275 to pave a mile, and it'd be $1 million if you want to turn it into an all-season road. Interesting enough is I went back and I looked because we're dealing with materials. So we went from the cost of, my average cost in 98 was $69,398 to do a mile. Again, now we're between $250, $275. Of that increase in wages, and it doesn't include fringe insurance and everything, but the increase of that roughly $175,000, $3,200 is labor. $3,231 exactly was labor. The rest is material.
Thank you. Supervisor Robinson.
Jimmy, in your cost to upgrade a road to an all-season road, how much of that is one-time cost because you're dealing with improving the base to accommodate the load, and versus how much is in paving?
The majority of that would be a one-time cost, that upgrade, because you're putting the base down. So it would be a one-time cost. And this thinking here, that $1 million is if we do the money, a project, 1 million something. If there would be any federal ties to it, that means we need to contract it out. That would change that 1 million to probably closer to 1.5 million.
Thank you. So, I guess, is that something? One are you said there might be some opportunities for grants or some kind of assistance from the state.
They just had a meeting last week. They had a hearing last week, Tuesday, on it. So it's in the early stages.
Thank you, Chairman Gibbs.
Jim, of the 612, because we do have some current miles that are all season, how many of the 612 roughly miles do we have that are all season?
Knew you were going to ask that. Evan, you have, I would guess the 612, if I had to throw a number out there, I would say that we probably post 450, 475 of that.
That are current?
Yeah.
Thank you. So, I guess getting back to the mandatory and discretionary, are there the programs that are listed here, and I'm not sure if, I'm sure it's not available now, but are they broken down in the budget as far as levy money that goes to support these programs? And I know, like I said, I don't want to put the administrator on the spot, but if that, is that even possible because of the grants and the, you know, what it takes to do the program, and it can change from year to year. So I don't know if there's any way to look at the levy limits on any of these.
Well, we have some broke down. I mean, you know, we have winter maintenance is our 280 account. But, you know, the way it's broke down, you have salt storage, removal of snow. Those are all part of that. So we do, if you take a look at our budget, we do have a breakdown in each category for materials, equipment rent, and personnel. That includes the fringe. So we do have a breakdown of each one of those. We do have, you know, like our fuel handling, our shop, winter maintenance, our main infrastructure, our 284 account, which is like our new bridges. Our paving is separate. Our maintenance is a separate one. So we do have a breakout, sort of, but I mean, we don't have one broken out to removal of fallen trees. We don't have a category for that. The bookkeeping on the backside of that would be horrendous.
Thank you. Supervisor Robinson?
One thing relative to the budget that I would request, and I know we've talked about it, is we've talked about that 2050 plan and trying to maximize the capture of general transportation aids. I would hope that we would, in the context of developing the 2024 budget, be aware of what that, what will fall off and how might that impact us if we're looking at that 6-year average. And I know we've got a good number of projects that have significant federal funding, but I think one of the goals would be to try to maintain the general transportation aid to the county and not have those big fluctuations. So I would hope that we would go into the budget looking at how do we stabilize that and project our projects out in a more uniform manner to maintain levy and therefore general transportation aid.
Thank you. Any of the other committee members? Any suggestions? Any questions on any of these services that is going to impact the budget, of course? Go ahead, Supervisor Dickinson.
So I appreciate your question, Mr. Chair, about the 24 items. So we have a budget. You have an expense budget of $40 million. That's in our 5-year plan. And we have a list of 24 programs and services, one of which is non-mandated. But we don't know what each line item of those 24, what it costs. We don't have that given to us. If we do know it, we don't have it. So we don't have a breakdown of the $40 million in expenses. We don't have a breakout of what is county levy, what is federal money, what is state money, what is a donation from some person down the road who wants their street paved and says, hey, here's $1 million. We have no idea what that is in front of us. We have been challenged that if we want to make cuts or additions, that we have to direct into a program or service, right? I mean, this is what we're being asked to do. That's difficult to do if we don't have the breakout to know where the money is. If you looked at your home budget and you spent $2,000 a month and you said, I'd like to save $200, but you have no idea what you're spending on your internet, what you're spending on your homeowner's insurance, what you're spending on cutting your grass, whatever it might be, makes it kind of difficult to determine how I'm going to cut that 200. Another question that comes up for consideration is we have a level of service for our roads, what we call PACER, at 7. So our level of service for roads is 7. What is the level of service for all the other programs and services that we're offering? So if we're doing culverts, is it a level of service at 10? Do we know? Is it a 5? So because we've also been challenged to say, well, we have these levels of service for mandated programs. Do we know if we can go lower from 5 to 4? Well, we don't, because we're not given a level of service. So the challenge, again, in the program or service, it falls into all of these kinds of things. I could say, let's save some money by moving back our update of all equipment, CCIT, roads, wherever, and everything under infrastructure. Let's move that back 9 months. Do we know what that would save us? We can get to an average of the GTA by lowering that amount and just consistently being at that amount. We still get that average. It doesn't go up and down. So the average doesn't have to be $5 million higher and maintain at $5 million higher. It could be $100,000 lower and maintained at that. Last year I proposed, because of all these difficulties, about $200,000 in cuts for the highway department, amongst many others, in several resolutions that I put forth. It got no time on the table from HR Finance. They summarily dismissed it all. So you can't do that. You can't say, I just would like to adjust all of these, and there were supplies and expenses, and I have the spreadsheet. You can't do that because, well, then the argument becomes, well, we don't know if that's mandated or not mandated. We don't know if that money's coming from the levy or not. These are the challenges that I continue to bring up. I don't know where I'm supposed to go to say, I believe we spend too much money and would like to reduce that, even if it's taking money from the state or the federal government, because that is still some taxpayers' money. Look at what's happening on the federal level with the discussions with the debt ceiling. Well, we're just going to increase the debt. And it's considered and hailed as a good thing because we're keeping government open. It's debt. That money we don't have. So I'm trying to figure out where I go with this. I mean, I could suggest, here would be my suggestion, our level of service for every program and service is a 7. We'll just maintain the PACER rate, and we'll call it the PACER standard, and we'll put a level of service of 7 to everything that we have, and then see where that leaves us. I hope you understand where I'm coming with that. I'm trying not to be argumentative. I'm trying to offer up some suggestions. I'm not saying, I truly believe, the last thing I'll say on this, I believe there are several things that government is required to do that is very important. I believe it's safety, infrastructure are 2 of those, right at the top. I mean, it has to do with how people can get about safely and conduct business and personal relationship, et cetera. So when it comes to infrastructure, it does make it difficult for me to say, well, where should we look at a cut or look at an addition? Because I think we're doing a good job. I'm just trying to find a place where we can address it, and I'm sure there's got to be a way that we can reduce it more. And if we can start here, maybe that helps other departments. Thank you.
Thank you. Administrator Leonard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have, first of all, I would say I completely, I believe I agree with everything Supervisor Dickinson said. I just want to give you guys an update on one project that I think is related to an underlying goal that I've heard. I certainly heard loud and clear last year, and that is to Supervisor Dickinson's point about level of service. This was brought up at the Environmental Resources Committee as well. How do we really assess what level of service is? And I can only speak to my experience. During my time in administration and what I've been told, and I certainly defer to Jim on kind of what his experience has been, but in my experience, it's largely been kind of as Supervisor Dickinson has referenced, service level has been assessed on an anecdotal basis, and I'll use the very sexy topic of cutting grass in parks as an example. When we don't cut grass frequently enough, county board members would get calls about our level of service, and we would staff would then get that information at a committee meeting about, hey, we need to up our level of service, and we would do that. But it was kind of that removed level of service, anecdotal experience, plowing snow, as was referenced, certainly something that the public is very keen to, whether or not we're doing that in a timely fashion. But we haven't, Pacer's a great example. That is a target. The committee has set a target, but we haven't, I think we have an opportunity to be more intentional with what those targets are, and certainly more transparent with what those are. Staff have standard practices. Jim knows how often that they go out and cut grass along the state highways. That's dictated by our maintenance agreements with the state of Wisconsin and what they'll reimburse us for. But I want to give you an update on what I understood a directive of the board to be last year, and that was relative to the data officer position. That has been posted. We have a number of applicants right now, and I've been working to kind of lay out what I believe the board would be looking for, to Supervisor Dickinson's point, for each of the programs that we have, identifying key performance indicators around 3 areas. And the first is, how much of something did we do? The second is, how well have we done it? And the third is kind of an impact measure. Is anyone better off by virtue of the service? Now, I don't have a great deal of, I can't show you a template other than if you look to the Health and Human Services Committee. I've tasked all the departments with starting to come up with what those key performance indicators are across their priority programs. And the Health Department rolled out their annual report that had that framework around those 3 areas. Now, we certainly have some refinement to do, but I think my experience has been there's absolutely an opportunity to highlight what those targets are for service level. If we have we'll stay with Pacer rating, because that's, I think that's a clear one for us. We can have, what is our target is 7, what is our actual, and we can track our performance against that. But, I don't want to sugarcoat anything to say, hey, that's going to be done next week. But I appreciate the comments. They're certainly accurate. We have opportunities to improve in that regard. With respect to the specific breakdown of overall budget with levy, state revenue, and other revenue, we can get that. I'll bring that back for your next meeting. We'll work with Jim and create a pie chart similar to what I know you've seen at other committees, or even what presentations you've seen here for our kind of our revenue stream.
Thank you. Supervisor Robinson?
Chris, I agree with many of your points. The problem that we have is we don't have a uniform ranking system. There's a different ranking system for bridges than there is for roads, and you get into sufficiency ratings and on a scale, but it might be worthwhile to look at that. But I would like to just point out that the budget went up $8,600,000 last year, and $8.2 million of that was increased funding, part because of the bipartisan infrastructure law and some of the other infusions of dollars, and projects like Highway K and others where we were able to capture additional match. So I would hope that we would continue to pursue those opportunities when they present themselves. The net levy only went up 368,000 or 3.92, and so I think we have to keep in mind where they're coming from. But I think that it would be worthwhile to look at what are the levels of service, how often are we mowing, how often are we plowing, what are the expectations relative to winter maintenance in terms of, when people see black ice, they want it gone. So we've tried some innovative ways, and I think that they've done a very good job on maintenance, winter maintenance, and other things, trying to capture latest trends, whether it's using the salt brine and other things. But if we could perhaps have a presentation of what some of the innovative approaches that we've had in some of these areas to lower our cost going forward. I know Kevin's done that in the past, and Jim has done that with others, but that would be helpful as well. But to get into, I don't know if we have to take all all of the areas this year, but pick out some of the higher cost ones and look at what we've done, what's levy, what's support, what are the, again, what are the opportunities for us to capture non-levy dollars to support them.
Thank you. And just a comment, the administrator started out with grass cutting. I experienced that this week with a softball game that I was at. For my granddaughter, the grass hadn't been cut. It wasn't a county park, but that's all the parents were talking about, how terrible the park was not maintained. And it was like, yeah, that's, I mean, in little things like that, it's the parents that are there and the people using that react to that. So those little things like that do affect people because when they're affected by it when they're there. So, but that was kind of a good point because that was just last week. But anyways, I Supervisor Dickinson, go ahead.
Maybe they were participating in No Mow May.
I didn't think of that.
So there you go. There was one other question I had, and that is, do the departments have a contingency plan that if there was an emergency and they had to cut, where they would cut? What would be the, if something happened, boom, there's a, economic disaster, so to speak, and you need to cut 5%. Do you have an idea of where that might be?
Historically, I would say we don't have a standing plan as far as I would characterize one. I would say we've done those before. We did that. I prepared that for the board to review in 2020 with the pandemic onset about what are some things that we're going to do proactively, I would say, or I guess it's reactive, but it was proactive in the sense that we implemented many of those things before we saw the economic downturn that flowed from the pandemic. But our general strategies that we've implemented in the past are things, I mean, the simplest, easiest one is related to personnel. I've shared this with every committee and the full board numerous times. The delivery of government services, as Jim referenced before with our cost for highway, it's significantly in most of our departments, it's driven by personnel budget. Jim's a little different. He's got a lot of costs relative to equipment and materials, but we make changes relative to personnel. We would hold positions when we have vacancies, and we did that as a result of the pandemic. My experience I've had the pleasure, if you call it that, of working on the federal, state, and now local level. And when we've had economic challenges at each of those other areas, my experience with them was that furloughs were implemented. I mean, they're a very blunt instrument. I can't recall the county doing one in 2008, 9, 10. I know the state did, but I don't believe the county. 2 days?
Excuse me, sorry. I believe in 2002, we had some budget cutbacks, and the highway department, we let 6 people took early retirements.
Okay. So again, largely around personnel. So there's various ways to do that, but those would be the contingencies. As I shared during the budget kickoff, I think one of the ways we insulate ourselves against that is the policy that the county board has adopted relative to sales tax. We have a pretty conservative estimate of sales tax. And we also budget for 100% of our personnel costs in the majority of our departments. We have budgeted tighter in highway and sheriffs based on budget pressures, but that built-in attrition, not budgeting for built-in attrition, I think helps us. Again, that serves to be your funding for your capital the year following the audit. But I wouldn't say we have a standing plan of this is what we would do. But we do have historical practice to look back on, and our budgets are pretty status quo and relatively personnel driven. So they would be personnel response driven.
Thank you. There, and I'm not sure, but the total number of county employees have gone down. The highest, I can't remember what it was, over 700 or so, and now there's less, I'm not sure. So there has been, reduction in personnel overall countywide. I'm not sure what the numbers were, but they did go down. So as far as these services, and the first part is the mandatory and discretionary programs, and if, like I said, we were talking about, this drives the budget for the highway department. Is there any particular one of those we want to look at, or is it, we don't know what the levy limits are on these or what the levy commitment are for these? I just wanted to know where the committee wants to go with that. Like Supervisor Robinson said, we have, there's the summer project, there's a winter project. We have another project that's still out there, and that's where the new highway department and when that may happen. That's going to be a significant budget outlay. That's it's inevitable, and we've known that, but like I said, it hasn't been determined where or when. So, but that's out there yet. So, do we want to just continue with the mandates, Supervisor Robinson, or do you want to move on to the user fees, rate fees? There's only 9 of those also, but.
Well, maybe for just discussion, could we start with the 5 highest levy supported programs and start with the, bringing the information on those, for the starting point?
Thank you. And that we could discuss at the next meeting, pick up with that. Is that acceptable to the committee, or Chris, you're any comments on that?
I mean, that's a good suggestion. I would really be interested in those 24 items, some kind of cost for those 24 items, if that's what we're being given. Right. I mean, this is the document we're given to say these are the programs and services that are being offered by this department or whomever. If that's what we're supposed to look at, then we have to have an understanding of what that money is for all of them, not just the top 5 at some point, right?
That's up to the committee. Administrator Leonard?
Yeah, this is good discussion, and I think we should put something like this on either the executive committee or perhaps the full board. That idea of program budget costs, to get that in a meaningful way, my sense is you have either one of 2 options. As a county, we would fundamentally change the way we budget from line item budgeting, and I'm going to butcher this explanation, so I'll just say if you go to your Wisconsin Counties Association Supervisor Handbook, the black handbook, I think it's the 8th edition that all new supervisors receive, and all supervisors, I believe, in the state receive every term. There's a section on budgeting, and it describes the various types of budgets that can exist. Counties, and Marathon County, I don't know anyone that doesn't do a line item budget, and that's what we do. So as was referenced before, when you can look at that 600+ page document and it's got equipment and revenue lines, and you look above and it's got personnel, people aren't allocated to, we don't have one person that their only job is tree removal. We have a body of people who we assign to general tasks. In the program document that you have before you, we tried to break out the various programs the various programs and services we deliver, but those don't align with all of the budgets necessarily. It's an imprecise way to do it. If we wanted to align, you could change to a program-based budget, and I don't know how that would happen. I can look into that if that's the desire of the board. The other way to do it, and I think I referenced this at this committee, I apologize if I didn't, but is the reliance upon algorithms to allocate individuals. And one of the systems that the board adopted, and I believe it was 2015, was this idea to utilize priority-based budgeting. I'll be honest, that is a great deal of work, and it requires continued input and effort. If the county, if that's a true desire, I need to know that, and we need to put staff time and energy into that for programs for us to utilize that computer program to allocate things. And I'll give you a real quick overview. I apologize, this is probably more information than you want to know. But through that, what you do is you do identify all the programs, and then you do estimate the time that each employee has for each of the programs. So we'd have Kevin laying 0% for tree removal on a highway. I'm making an assumption that you don't remove trees from highways. 1%, maybe. And I certainly would have 0% next to my name. I'd like to do it maybe, Jim. But, you'd have other people that, from our maintenance crews, that you'd assign 25%. And you do those estimates. And you do that for things as mundane as paper. Like we allocated all of our line items in our line item budget, we allocated those line items to programs as well. So we can do that, but from my explanation, I think you likely can take away, it's a lot to go through those 600 pages and allocate and do those estimations. But I get the sense, and I've gotten the sense at some other committees, that that's perhaps the direction that the county board wants to go in terms of really being able, as Supervisor Dickinson said, to be able to dial into what those costs per program are. Because right now it is very blunt. You're not going to get that. We have some departments where you might get, for some programs, better information. But for the majority, if you look through that 600 and some page budget document, there's not programs as overarching GLs.
Thank you. Supervisor Dickinson?
I don't know what the answer is. I appreciate the information. The example I would use is we hired nurses with COVID money for the health department to provide COVID services. So we would say that those nurses, every dollar for those nurses is not the levy. Unless there's a little bit of time here and a little bit of shift there because somebody's picking something up somewhere, which ties into my point before when it comes to, I've said this before about state money and federal money and grants and such. It is sold as if, well, that's not the levy at all. Well, it actually is. Because as you hire someone to do work, that affects the department, affects other people in the department, affects the work that gets done, the resources, the size of your facility. All of that is affected. So there's a little bit of having it both ways here, which is the predicament in this discussion that we're having. So getting into every line item and trying to figure out every cost, yeah, it's a lot of work. And it's a lot of work for us as board members, and it is what some people would say is micromanaging and all of this. So my final point is trying to find this balance between setting a policy and a budget, saying this is, which I think we're trying to do with priorities, as long as we get good input from all the committees on that, to say what is the overarching, and then when we get into these committees, say, do we have some understanding of the heavy hitters or the low-hanging fruit, through these are the things that I would get rid of in my department if we didn't have additional money, then you can figure these things out.
Thank you.
If I can add one.
Go ahead.
You're absolutely right on grants. I mean, I think we have a lot of opportunity relative to allocation and understanding of overhead expenses. To your point, I mean, if we add, say we were wonderfully blessed with a whole bunch of the money that was referenced relative to even highway projects. We're probably not going to hire additional HR, finance, or highway administrative staff, but there absolutely is an impact on their allocation of work. And I think we have some opportunities for us to better understand and better allocate overhead. So perhaps putting this on the executive committee to really move in that direction of figuring out what the best path is to get to a program-based budget makes the most sense. But I too, Supervisor Dickinson, I don't know what the best answer is. I'll reach out to my colleagues and see if there are other counties that have adopted a program-based budget, but I'm not aware of any. Jim, are you? Your budget is largely dictated by, you have to give it to the state in the form that they want. But Mr. Chair, I'll do some asking around. I have a weekly call with some of my colleagues.
Okay, thank you. We'll discuss it at the next meeting. So I do like Supervisor Robinson's, maybe look at not all of these, but maybe even 2 or 3 of the highest levy limit programs, just, to try to find out if there's a way to get down to the dollars that are used for levy and grants. I don't know what the what the other committee members look at, but I mean, the 2 of them, the ones for the state, the use of WSDOT cost accounting systems, I'm sure there's really not a whole lot of opportunities we have with any kind of levy limits that's set by the state. And then the other one were the state highway maintenance. It's a routine agreement that we have. I don't think there's much we have to do with negotiating. It is what it is. Is that correct?
Correct. The state RMA, there's zero negotiation. That's the budget, but the good part on the state RMA is, I mean, it's actual cost again, and if we go over budget, they still pay the bills, because most of my budget and the state budget, a lot of it's driven by Mother Nature. So, if you look at some of these on the list of, tree cutting, some years we may spend a couple thousand, some year we may spend a couple $100,000. This past winter with that ice storm, we're spending a lot of money, so a lot of it's Mother Nature driven. And on the other one that you mentioned with the state cost accounting, there is a admin that the state derives, so that's recovered too.
Okay. Thank you. Is that where we want to pick up with these mandates? Look at 2 or 3 of them, and we can then decide whether it's worth pursuing the other 20 or so programs that we have, if they're even it depends on what the levy limits on those are. But like I said, I'm not going to have a 2-hour meeting, so I just want to move on. But I just want to know what direction you want to go to, or where we want to pick up at our next month's meeting. Anyone? So just pick up with the mandatory and discretionary. Do we want staff, Administrator Leonard and staff, to even look at 1 or 2 of these, just to give us an example of what this would entail, to try to break these programs down like this? Split the difference, 3.
Our big programs is our paving program and winter maintenance. So those are our major programs. We can look at the bridge program, and again, a lot of that is grant funded, as Supervisor Dickinson said. So we do have some of those out there, but the biggest ones are our paving program and our winter maintenance and our general maintenance. So those are probably our big 3. Again, we have a fine breakdown to the state. Probably that's the one we have the best breakdown of. But again, there's nothing we can do, and it's 100% reimbursable.
Thank you. Supervisor Robinson?
Could I ask that Jim and the administration work on having a discussion on rolling stock and our commitment to funding rolling stock, because it's been stagnant and what our needs are going forward? I think Jim's been raising that, but I think it's, we run that through the capital improvement budget, but we've not had an increase, and I'd like to know what the ramifications are on that short and long term, and where we might want to move our rolling stock funding policy going forward.
Okay, that could be on the discussion for next month. Is there, so did we decide on a couple other of these programs that we just want them to take a stab at and move forward? Or, like I said, if we go through all 24 of these, well, there, like I said, there's 2 of them that are states, so it'd be 22 of them. But I just, like I said, I don't know what it's going to entail for staff to break down some of this, as Supervisor Dickinson is trying to get to, as far as what, line item, what one of these projects or what are these programs cost for levy.
Let's have if I can make a suggestion, and I think just echo what Supervisor Robinson said, and we'll work with, I'll speak with Jim, we'll get the kind of the levy, state money, and any other revenue dollars for kind of those big 3 programs that Jim referenced initially. We'll make those presentations. I don't anticipate having that done by next month to be a problem, but if it is, Mr. Chair, we'll get in contact with you, see how that presentation goes, if that's kind of the information you were looking for, and then we'll assess next steps. As Jim referenced, I don't know that spending a whole lot of time on the state contract programs is time well spent, based on our inability really to negotiate or really lose funding based on our costs. But would that make sense to you, Mr. Chair?
Absolutely, and if it's going to take longer, we can always move on to and discuss the use of rates and fees too. We'll not have. We can always move on to that, and then the levy stuff. If you're not prepared to have that at the next meeting, it's fine. But is that okay with the committee? All right. Well, then we won't go into the use of rates and fees and understanding of department use of levies. We can follow up with those at future meetings. We'll move on to number 6 for operation functions required by statute, ordinance, resolution, or policy. 6A, consideration of request from Broadband Task Force relative to allocations of funding for staffing assistance. And Supervisor Robinson's going to handle that.
Thank you, and Jerry can chime in. Recently, Marathon County joined with Synergy, the Area Economic Development Association, in submitting a grant for the broadband equity in equity and access deployment program, and we received approximately $18,000 in the county for planning to develop the grant. And we've been working on developing goals, and this will sort of blend in with an update on broadband as well. So we've been working on goals and submitted a draft to Synergy for inclusion in their report to the Public Service Commission. But one of the things that we noted is that we really don't have a lead person in the county anymore. We used to have Noor Ali Assam, who worked in the administrator's office and then went to the health department and continued to carry on some of those responsibilities, but she left for family care or paternity leave and decided not to come back, and so we're without a person. And Jerry's been doing a lot of the work. Sarah Severson in the administrator's office has been coordinating some of it, and a lot of the questions come to me as an elected official. We thought that in light of some of the requirements for planning going forward and how critical planning is in our ability to capture grants, that we ought to look at using the planning grant of that 18,000 plus, supplementing that with the American Rescue Plan Act dollars over the next 18 months to hire a person approximately 3 days a week, 25 hours a week, to work on our broadband efforts. Currently, there's the $800 million to $1.1 billion that will be coming into the state of Wisconsin through that deployment, $42.5 billion nationwide. It's important that we be in a position to compete with that, and the way we compete with it is partnering with the internet service providers. But one of the areas that we need to have better information on is where is service available. And the Federal Communication Commission has updated the fabric map, and that's highly inaccurate. There are significant portions of the county that are labeled as served and they're not served. We'd like to encourage people to challenge the information on a granular house-by-house basis, as well as the potential for the county to do bulk challenges, and this person could help with those efforts. But there's a need, given the amount of money, and the state was looking at $750 million in broadband funding. I don't know where the legislature is on that, but there are significant opportunities that exist, and we would benefit by having that person tied solely into grant funding and for a time certain to help us coordinate, develop our plan, and how we're going to provide access, how we'll work with the internet service providers, and how we'll educate the public relative to needs. And the broadband task force is recommending the creation of the position. We're bringing it to this committee. Ultimately, it would need to go to Human Resources, Finance, and Property, and ultimately the county board. But the thought is that for approximately $75,000, we could fund this over the next 18 months and strengthen our position. Just yesterday, PSE released the 24 projects that were funded with $16 million. We did not receive any of those funds. Some of our partners were successful in other areas. I think that we just need to strengthen our application, target our resources for those unserved and underserved areas, and be a little bit more focused and hopefully more successful.
Thank you. Jerry, anything to add?
Not really. I'm available to answer questions. I can just say that this BEAD grant work that this person would do is necessary in order for us to be in a position to get some of the distribution of money that's expected to be around the end of June, early July. John was talking about. The federal government's going to be giving that out. It's going to be somewhere between 750 and 9, maybe as much as $1 billion. I've heard a pretty big range, but that's coming, and getting these maps right is going to be key to being able for us to go to these ISPs and say, hey, we want you to do this project in this area of Marathon County. We've got to make sure that all of these other things are addressed beforehand in order to get those grants.
Thank you. Ed, and I think this would be a good add to this broadband, because it's getting to the point where we need somebody to focus on this, to keep moving it forward. And like I said, there's been significant progress on it. And like I said, to kind of get it across the finish line, this would be a good use of them resources. So you're looking for a motion to approve this position?
I would move that the Infrastructure Committee recommend approval creation of the position, which will be 100% grant or ARPA funded.
Is there a second? Second by Straub. Is there any discussion, questions? Supervisor Dickinson?
Who is the person going to report to? Are we the task force, Jerry, administrator, assistant administrator? Because that's not really on here.
Probably me, Chris.
Okay. So we say it's all grant funded. You got some ARPA money in here, and ARPA money, and then this 18,000. That's so 50, 18, 68. You're saying 75,000. So there's another 7,000 just being a stickler for details. Not sure where that 7's coming from. I made the comment before, we go for something, we go for money, a position's then created, we pay for the position, and then there's going to be additional costs. Kiosks, educating citizens about affordability. It says developing kiosk signage at all libraries, that's a cost. Reaching out to all town halls and document their internet access. Well, 3 days a week, well, that's going to be nighttime work. You're going to have to go to town board meetings. I'm not really sure who you're looking for this position to be. Is it going to be a college student? Is it going to be a professional? Is it going to be somebody who's retired looking for additional work? Doesn't seem like much of a focus. We're starting down the path of, hey, we need another person. And what I can envision next year, well, we actually need to hire a full-time person in the administration to do broadband. And that's going to be a 6-figure salary. That's kind of where I see this going, or high tens of thousands, maybe not 100,000 is the particular salary, but I have a concern. And the final thing I'll say is this is how it just starts to roll. You think there's a good idea, we want to do broadband, we want to do this thing, and then we identify, well, we need something more. Then we get something more, and then, well, we need a little something more. There's no end date in sight, that sort of thing. So maybe there should be a restriction on this that says this position will be done at this particular time. Those are my concerns.
Thank you. Go ahead, Supervisor Robinson.
I think the expectation is that it be done at December 31st of next year on a time certain. We looked at other options. We looked at whether Extension could do this. We looked at the role of North Central Regional Planning Commission. And I think that there were just some concerns about whether we could get the person dedicated to serve the needs of the county. And I think this was, it's still a work in progress. We'll need to refine the position description and other things. But these tasks are being done right now. And Sarah Severson is doing things. We've had the flyers relative to the speed test. We've had presence at the fair. We've had presence at other places. But what we've lacked is that person to coordinate it and support it and tie some of the loose ends. And it will be critically important that we have that relationship with the internet service providers and others in order for us to be successful going forward. We are that whole LTD service area, Chris, on the western side of the county, is 2 years behind because of the expectation we were going to have the Rural Digital Opportunity Funds going in there. We continue to have hard to serve areas in some of our corners because of the sparsely populated areas and in the lack of return on investment. So we'll just need someone to do this, and it's meant to be a time certain. And if you want to I'd be happy to amend this to sunset the position on December 31st of 2024. I'll offer that amendment.
Thank you. Is there a second to the amendment? Supervisor Straub? Okay, thank you. I just would like to add one thing, and I don't disagree with Supervisor Dickinson. So, however, once this 50,000 or 75,000 and comes up and he mentioned, or Supervisor Dickinson, we need to hire this person full time. That would be up to the board to do that. I don't disagree, with the comment. However, once this funding is gone and they'd come back, the broadband task force would come back to whomever and try to get a position full time or whatever to add this. That again, like I said, has to be approved to the whole board. So there is some. There's some limitations in there. So, is there any discussion on the resolution with the amendment? Go ahead, Supervisor Dickinson.
I will say, I'll approve it here. I wish we had 3 other members here, so that we could have so So I just don't feel like, there's a few of us speaking. And so part of my reasoning is it should move forward for a larger group, I think, rather than, kind of nixing it at this group. I feel that. I do think there is a benefit, but I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. I wish there were more members here also, but it is what it is. Jerry, go ahead.
Could I just clarify that I think when John and I worked on this, the best guess I had was about, looking at, we'd hire a part-time contractor, it would probably be Supervisor Dixon to answer your question. I'm assuming that I would be looking for probably like a retired professional IT person or someone with some broadband experience. It's a little tricky because there's a lot of marketing related stuff in it, so it may be, I think Lance just said, it's kind of a unicorn. You're going to have to try to find someone that can do both of these things, which is pretty different skills. I think if we can, my best guess, and I don't have anyone in front of me, but I have a couple of names of people that would potentially fill this position. I think if we can commit to these hours, we can hopefully get them at a reasonable rate. I noticed, I saw what you had in there. I guess I was thinking that it was 75 minus 18, so the ARPA request would be 57, I think would be the accurate number on it. So my apologies, I didn't have that number right in there.
Thank you. So that would be added to the resolution that we're going to be voting on. Any other discussion? So we're voting for the resolution with the amendment?
Amendment first.
Amendment first, okay. So any discussion on the amendment to the resolution? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, now moving back to the original resolution with the amendment. Is there any discussion? And these, what are the changes again that are going to be added on it just with the?
Sunset.
Okay, sunset. All right. All right, so is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to 6B, Utility Accommodation Policy Proposed Revisions. Griesbach?
We will be having this discussion at the July meeting. Just for update on it, this utility accommodation policy is something that was originally passed by this committee back in 2000, again in 2012 for the updates, and we're looking at some updates. John has been working with his former colleagues at the DNR with some concerns he had regarding some contaminated soil. So until we get some clarification on that, and then I will get you a red line of all the changes that have been done since the last update of 2012. So you have that in your packet for next month. So
Okay.
John will have some more information for us.
Thank you. Supervisor Robinson?
So once you dig up soil, it becomes waste, and because of that, there are sometimes unforeseen liability. We just want to make sure that the utility accommodation policy factors in. The DNR has come up with guidance for management of contaminated soil and other soil waste, and just make sure that that's incorporated into our accommodation policy so that we don't wind up with any unintended liability.
Thank you. All right, any other discussion on that? Questions? All right, we'll move on to 7, educational presentation and committee discussion. We already took care of 7A, so we'll move on to 7B, 2023 summer construction project update. And Griesbach?
Kevin Lang has some updates on the Highway KK, and he can run through the program for you. I'll just hit 2 of them that weren't on here. As far as the construction update and program update, we did receive some more funding on a couple of bridges. We did get the 80/20 funding again on the County Trunk Highway J Bridge. That's about a half mile south of G. And the other bridge that just to mention we received funding for now is the County Trunk Highway P Bridge, Fenwood Creek over by Fenwood. That bridge, we did fall in the 100%, so it's 100% reimbursable for design and construction, so it's nice getting 100%ers.
Okay, all set?
Yes, go ahead.
All right,
Thank you.
on to the exciting part with construction. So up on the screen, I have some pictures for Highway KK. I don't know if any of you guys heard about this. There was a culvert that was out there this spring. It's been a pretty hot item. And when people understand what the size of this is, then they start to get it a little bit more that when it's classified as a culvert, culvert can range from a 12-inch pipe to what we're installing here. So this is our pumping system that we have for dewatering. We're running a 12-inch pump and an 8-inch pump. If we would have started this project any sooner, we were at, I think, 18,000 gallons per minute earlier, and it was more than that before we started. So the bypass pumping or the bypass channels would have been a challenge, but the manufacturing of the concrete box culvert, we accelerated that, and this was the earliest that we could get it started, and they started that project on Tuesday for setting that. So just a picture of our bypass pumping. That's not what I want. All right, we're back. So this is the natural stream at the inlet. They had a little high spot in there, so that blue line is our intake hose going down there. And we're just pulling that clean water out. We're running it across the road, and then we take it from our discharge hoses into some larger culverts. What that does is it takes the energy out of that, and it allows it to lower the velocity of the water, so when it re-enters the stream, we're not washing out the stream with it. If we just have those hoses going direct, they'd blow out the soil and make a bit of a mess. Those are those same pipes on the left side. The white thing is a water dam. We purchased these a few years ago. Guys used to use a lot of sandbags. We'd use anything ranging from little 25-pound sandbags to those 1-yard bags, which is about 2,000 pounds of sand. We'd place those with the machine. But we bought these a few years back for about $2,500 for the smaller ones. They're just a plastic liner. We fill them with water. They conform to the stream, and they're reusable over and over again instead of running a semi out to get 2-ton sacks of sand that generally would only last a year or two, and then the environment they'd fall apart, so they were garbage. These are lasting us a couple seasons with some maintenance. We do have a resident who's been giving some aerial views of this, so this is some drone footage from them showing, you see those bypass culverts up on, that's that little culvert where the smaller excavator is. The larger excavator's on the other side. We have a dozer down in the bottom for leveling that. The concrete walls you see on the far ends of the channel, they're 2-foot toe walls, we call them. They're scour protection. They go under the structure, so during a major flood event, it eliminates or reduces the risk for any scour going on underneath your structure. So just a few shots, different angle here. I don't have the yardage for the soil, but we had a lot of excavation on this, so we rented an off-road truck. That's that orange guy right there. What that allowed us to do is, instead of having a larger soil disturbance area to stockpile our material, that machine can back up ramps and we can go a lot higher with it, so we disturb less area. And we can move a lot more soil with it, and they don't get stuck in the sand going up and down from our banks. So this is a site, they started setting this on Tuesday. The toe walls are buried now underneath the shallowest part of that structure. We have a 350-ton crane that is from Peters that is in there. You can see the structure in the background where he's picking that up. They come on the semis and they are flat. That is one of the first full sections there. They're flat and the guys need to pick them up, flip them, and then send them down. So that's after they reset it, bringing in the next piece here. This is a full section that comes in. You see it, they picked it up, they set it, and then they have to re-rig it with the crane and carry these things over. Each one's about 47,000 pounds. So that's my last shot where you see we have the box in there. There's a butyl seal that goes inside between each one of these joints, and there's an exterior wrap that goes on the outside of them. We have about 950,000 pounds of concrete that's going in the ground for this structure. So guys should be finishing up, I would guess, pretty soon with setting their last pieces. They had 5 sections to go today, or 5 semi-loads, which is 5 more pieces on there. They're going to start backfilling tomorrow, plan to backfill and get up to the top of the structure tomorrow. That'll allow them to take those bypass pumps out and let the water start flowing back through the structure. And then all next week is going to be site restoration, building the road back up. To set that crane, we had to cut out 8 feet of soil to set a pad that was low enough, because with the crane, the further away you lift it, exponentially you lose capacity on it. So we lowered that down so that the crane could get as close as possible so that he's stable and able to lift all those sections. So that's our Highway KK culvert in a quick 5-minute video slide. Any questions on those before I shut that down?
Any questions on the culvert? When did you start on this, Kevin?
We started, it's 3 weeks ago. I don't have the exact date. We were planning for 2 weeks of work ahead of time, and just because of the nature of having the road closed already, we went in there a 3rd week ahead of time, just starting with removals. If we would have started 2 weeks, it would have been a lot more overtime, and just that way the guys had a little bit extra buffer time to get everything set, get the pumps set up, and make sure everything's going to function for them. And the Mother Nature blessed us this over the past couple of weeks.
Good, thank
So I
you.
apologize for your dry lawns, but we appreciated it.
Yeah, that helps the no mow. Anything else? Any questions on that?
Okay, our other work, we got lots more going on than that. Highway S, our crews are doing a bunch of milling out there. So we're starting at the county line, working our way up to 29. They started that work this week with the milling. Some of that's going to be pulverized. That work is going to start next week, and then we're starting paving on June 12th for that. So a lot of that is, we have one major project in there with the pulverized and relay and full depth. A lot of the other ones are just pavement preservation projects, just taking the existing pavements, preserving them, and extending the life out of them. Our mowing, we'll kick that off a little bit later in June. We'll get going on that. Our bridge crew, next Monday, out on Highway H, north of 29 in the town of Halsey. They're doing a bridge replacement project, so they'll be doing a full removal and a full reconstruction of that bridge. It's right by there's a quarry up there on H, just a little bit south of Amco Park, so if you get up that way, stop at the park. And then the Highway K project, that's one Jim and I are doing coordination with, but that's a federally funded project, so it's a LET project that American Asphalt and Michaels Materials they're the prime contractors on that. That started this week. This week they left the traffic open. Next week they will start intersection work, and it'll be officially closed for basically the rest of the summer. The biggest part of that project for the closure is the Highway WW intersection. It's being reconstructed as a roundabout, and once they do the removals on that and the grading efforts, it's not practical to maintain much access for that. So detour route on that uses Highway Q to 51. That's the gist of it. That's what we got kicking off right now.
Thank you. Jim?
I just had one item about the mowing operations. We did do the test area for the growth inhibitors, where we trying to slow down the growth of the grass. We put it on the roads we're paving this year and everything west of Stratford. You can definitely see the difference. The areas we did not spray, we're probably going to be needing to mow here, like Kevin said, in a couple of weeks, where we put that growth inhibitor. We will only be mowing that once this year, probably sometime in August. So it's working as planned.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Jim. All right. We'll move on to 7C, broadband update. Covered it. Okay, thank you. Then 7E or 7D, special event ordinance work group update. I just asked Administrator Leonard to just touch on it briefly, because we do have Supervisor Robinson and Supervisor Straub that is willing to serve on that from this committee. Go ahead.
I just step back. I forgot. I wanted to mention one thing.
Sure.
On broadband. John and I met with Frontier, gentleman from Frontier a couple of days ago. I don't remember if it was Tuesday or something. But he went over the Frontier PSC grant project. Actually, I think there's 2 of them, if I remember correctly, the way he had it worded. He showed us the maps and talked about the schedule. They're expecting to get the engineering work done by the end of June. which is all their planning work, and then ordering equipment, getting contractors lined up, and then they still expect to have all of the work done by the end of 2024. So there's no construction. I think the first construction is September, and then there's another section starting in October, another one right after that, I think, and then of course there'll be the winter break for frost. But if there are any questions on that, that was a meeting with Frontier a few days ago.
Okay, thank you. Sir, any follow-up questions for John or Jerry? Okay. All right, thank you. So moving back to 7D with the special events, Administrator Leonard.
I'll be very quick, Mr. Chair. No substantive change from last month. As noted previously, Lori Miskimmons, the Director of Conservation Planning and Zoning, a couple of board meetings ago, the board considered some proposed zoning changes from the Environmental Resources Committee, and they referenced some special events type of permits within those zoning changes, and those were removed from those proposed changes. So we are working to have, I'm speaking with Lori Miskimmons. I intend to do so later this month. She had some projects that we're wrapping up in June, so we're trying to put together a more firm timeline and charter relative to that work group. And we do have individuals from the Environmental Resources Committee, the Public Safety Committee, and this committee that we understand would like to participate in that and provide policy direction to staff as we work through those updates that Corp Counsel referenced to you a number of meetings ago. But I will provide, as soon as we kind of get that timeline in place, I'll reach out to each of the members, to Supervisor Straub and Supervisor Robinson, to attend those and get that work started.
Thank you. I appreciate the update. Any questions for Administrator Leonard? All right, thank you. Moving on to 7E, review of County Safety Commission meeting. I have that in your packet. Kevin, you going to take that, or?
I have that one.
Jim?
That meeting was on May 3rd. Kind of like brief highlights, like was mentioned, you have it in your packet, but there was 2 fatalities in Marathon County since the first of the year. One in the city of Wausau and on the town of Halsey. We had another serious crash on State Trunk Highway 97 between Marshfield and Stratford. There was some discussion regarding that because they just did a large safety improvement on that. It was somebody just blew the stop sign at a high rate of speed, so it's one of those that we cannot unfortunately prevent every accident. But so we had 2 fatalities. Last year we had 5 in the same time frame. Our 5-year average for the year is 12, so we're doing well. Statewide, there was 170 fatalities so far in 2023. Same time last year, there was 205, so we're down 35. So we're seeing definitely a trend in the right direction. Now that the UTV, ATV push has been over, now the new one is golf carts. So they're starting to push golf carts, and they can't operate on any road that's 35 or above, or a county road right now. And the Sheriff's Department said they will have 0 tolerance for golf carts on the county system. So that's a new push. On the highway side, we did receive a 90-10 grant for the intersection of Highway N and J intersection. It's one of our higher accident intersections, so $579,311, so our share is going to be $57,000 for a 2025 construction date on that. We did also, part of it was the spring cleanup, was on the highway side in our report. With that cleanup, we did find a 9mm pistol out on the road, so we returned that to the Sheriff's Department. And we went through the 2023 construction program, which I had gone through last year with you. The other highlights is, we talked about the fatalities already. There is the National Speed Awareness date is July 26th, so the National Highway Traffic Safety group is going to be sponsoring that campaign. The main campaign is going to be from July 10th through the 31st. And right now we are in the middle of Click It or Ticket campaign by the State Patrol. Our next meeting will be August 2nd.
Thank you. Any questions, discussion on the update? All right, well, thank you, Jim. With that, we'll move on to number 8, next meeting dates, time, announcements, and future agenda items. We're going to continue with the 2024 annual budget and policy recommendations. And if there's anything else the committee members want to bring up, get a hold of myself or Jim, and we can make sure we get that on there. The next meeting date is Thursday, July 6th, 2023, at 9 o'clock. That, looking for number 9. Motion by Supervisor Dickinson, Supervisor Straub with a second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you very much.